I'm gonna just forge on ahead. Oh, 2 thumbs up. All right, it's my lucky day. All right, so things I went over that governance is basically just decision making. It's just the word that the industry has settled on to talk about decision making processes. And I would say there's sort of loose categories. There's a lot of overlap of the types of decisions. I think who gets to work on the project is a big one. Who gets certain privileges? Like for recently, there was a kerfuffle about the Bitcoin GitHub repo and who has commit access, and should the list of people with commit access be public? Would that be a risk to them? Is it a risk that they take on, like as part of the responsibility of maintaining this main technical implementation? There's also what features should the cryptocurrency have? What should the technical future be? What optimizing decisions need to be made? Who's going to be in charge of that? Often the way open source projects work is that there will be people who sort of own a core part of certain infrastructure. So sometimes there's arguments over like who gets to be the owner of whatever the particular subsystem is. And I think these like personal things are really what gets particularly contentious. But you often have personal energy invested in what you might expect to be just technical debates. Like, I don't know how long you guys have been paying attention to Bitcoin, but if you're not already familiar with it, I would Google the word SegWit for just endless arguing about something that seems like it should have been a straightforward technical decision. So it's really amazing to me sometimes how much people will argue about things, and just it'll be them saying the same things to each other over and over and over again. I'm sure all of you have observed this in the wild also, that when people really get their hearts into an issue, it goes beyond the level of trying to convince the other person, and you're just sort of like arguing at them. That's kind of an anti-pattern that I want more communities to avoid, maybe even national communities. What was I? Oh, so I was talking about.
I have a question on governance.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
The projects I like, they have a face of a person representing that project. Is there anybody that makes the decisions? In other words, they start out centralized, then they kind of say they're going to decentralize. But
yeah.
Does your company have a certain person that represents Zcash? Makes the decisions or not?
I'm
How are
definitely
the
not.
decisions made?
So the development process is still pretty centralized. There are 2 main entities, one of which I work for, which is the foundation. Then there's also the Zcash company, which is a separate for-profit company. And I would say that the main sort of, the main like well-known leader of the Zcash project is the CEO of the company. His name is Zuko Wilcox.
Zuko?
Yeah, Zuko, it's spelled Zooko. It's a nickname that he ended up kind of adopting as his default name.
What nation does that come? Does Zcash operate out of one particular nation?
The company and the foundation are both United States legal entities, but the cryptocurrency is global. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So just, if I may, you were talking briefly before that about just avoiding discussionary anti-patterns?
Yes. I think I was getting a little sidetracked, but I think it's very easy for people to communicate poorly, and for there to be sort of, or at least what I see as unnecessary conflict that comes out of that. It happens a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing is, you have a centralized authority right now, so they couldn't disagree with each other right now, right? Whereas Bitcoin, there were all these groups that disagreed about things.
Oh, I mean, you get that in the Zcash world also. And there are forks. Actually, I think forks are... I'm pretty pro-fork, because I think people should be able to have the options that appeal to them, and that, basically, like, I don't think it's bad that there's Bitcoin Cash as well as Bitcoin, because then you get to sort of run the experiment. Which of these actually works better? Which do people find more useful? And I think there's a lot more animosity between different forks than there really needs to be. Yeah?
Well, usually when you mention the word governance, it kind of denotes centralization.
Mm-hmm.
Someone basically putting out the rules and regulations for a particular industry. And we can see that happening with the moves that the SEC and other governmental organizations are making. But the whole concept to me about cryptocurrency is the wild, wild west.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody basically have their own way of doing things. And the centralization, which brings about a system of accounting, basically brings people under regulation, which we know the government wants, and maybe, well, you're saying Zcash doesn't, but the whole concept behind
you can have the decisions about development be relatively centralized without having the cryptocurrency itself be centralized. Sorry, I think I mixed up decentralized and centralized in that sentence. But I think it's probably impossible not to have a certain group of people making decisions about what code to write and what code to implement. There are more or less like either bigger groups of people contributing or less. I mean, there's in the open source world, there's something called the benevolent dictator for life, which is where there's literally one person making all of the final decisions. And you don't have to have that model. Like, you can have more. You can have a committee. You can have multiple different groups of people. You can have voting processes. But I think fundamentally, you are going to, for those decisions, because you need people to be competent and have domain expertise. And then also because it's just, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to run like a consensus process, but getting a large group of people to all agree on one course of action is fucking impossible. So I think but that's at the development level. And I think Bitcoin is a good example here because anyone can become a miner, right? Like, you don't need to please a certain group of people, or you don't need to like demonstrate any expertise aside from just being able to actually run the code that does the mining. So you have this, you have one layer of the decision-making process that is pretty centralized. And then you have this other layer, which is what actually runs the network, which is decentralized, which anyone can participate in, and people do because you can make a profit doing it, which incentivizes broad participation. I don't know, do you want to respond to that or like push back or anything?
Well, you know, I look at the world and, you know, we got a million different gods for a million different people. Everybody has their own version of what God is, and that's that central authority that allows us to go out and solve problems in the way that we conceive in solving those problems. And when it comes down to the crypto industry, it seems like everybody is afraid that somebody might, you know, ship some money to the terrorists someplace, or, you know, somebody might launder some money, and that's all that everybody's concerned. And, you know, while at the same time looking past the need for the people to have some form of currency so that they can trade with one another. And that's, you know.
I'll tell you, a voting session here, I think it was last Tuesday, but nobody showed up. I came because I don't know anything about coding, but I'm interested. I'm you know, I'm one of those people, I gotta know what's going on. And these guys were doing a program on blockchain, and it was amazing to watch these guys work. And they also gave me one other piece of information of why Ethereum is having such a problem now. It's because they're only proof of work, and what they're trying to do now is get the other side working so that they can expand. But if you talk to some of these guys, it really, I couldn't believe how these guys were working. It was amazing. It reminded me of Swordfish. You know?
It reminded you of
I
Swordfish.
mean,
The movie.
it was a movie.
Oh,
It was a
okay.
guy working the computers like
John
crazy.
Travolta.
Under duress, but these guys weren't under duress. But it was, if you stay tuned to Graham, if he puts out another meetup, it's worth talking to these guys that really know what they're doing, that do the programming and, you know, and the coding. because it's all open source, and it really amazed me, and you guys should take advantage of watching these guys work.
There are also tons and tons of resources. I agree with you that it's great to be able to experience it in person. There are tons of resources online for learning the basics of programming languages and such, if you guys want to get into it.
Will you watch them online too?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots and lots of YouTube videos, and there are courses and books, and kind of just like more than anyone could imagine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to governance for a moment. My basic question is, does Zcash organization under the nonprofit going to promote the decentralization of the way to bring people into their community, or are they going to, like Brian was asking, they're setting up this state-run organization, which is always a fact-finding exposition to find out how to basically corner the market?
As far as I know, Zcash, or as far as I know, no one involved in Zcash has really any contact with the government, aside from normal things like paying taxes or
Probably trying to actively avoid it.
what? Right. Yeah, just like sort of the normal things that the normal interactions with government that anyone who runs a business has, or anyone who runs a nonprofit in our case. So I don't think there, as far as I know, there's no like anything I would describe as like collusion. I also think like if that happened, it would diverge so significantly from the vision of the cryptocurrency and what the community wants for it that there would definitely be a port. And I think this is one of the really beautiful things about open source software and cryptocurrencies is that because the code is available for anyone to use, if there's a contentious decision that you don't like, you can, and there's enough like community support and developer support behind it, you can make your own version of the cryptocurrency. And there's a philosophical concept called exit and voice. And the idea is that in any political situation, any situation where you're trying to do something with other people you have to coordinate with, you have two options. And if you want to change things or direct how things go, you either have voice, which is basically trying to convince people to do what you want, and then you have exit. And exit is leaving to do your own thing. And I think cryptocurrencies are an exit movement in a very large sense. And I think especially the 2008 crash in America really sort of woke people up to, I mean, I don't want to litigate that in detail, but to some of the abuses of the banking industry. Mm-hmm. And then cryptocurrency, I think that was a big part of the energy behind Bitcoin originally, is that people wanted to exit from state-controlled money and have their own money that was more egalitarian. And I guess actually circling back around to your question, I do think that something that almost all of cryptocurrency communities need to work on is accessibility and avenues for people to participate. And there are a number of ways to address that. Like one of the things, there's some basic stuff that the Zcash Foundation is doing, like we want to have tutorials on our website. Someone needs to write the tutorials, right? Or to find all the existing tutorials that are spread out all over the internet and sort of gather them together so that people have one place they can go find information about, like, here's how Zcash works, here's how you can start using Zcash, here are some relatively trustworthy resources for buying it, that kind of thing. But then there's also, I think, participation in governance is important. Like, we ran it was like a community advisory panel to help direct what the Zcash Foundation is going to do over this year. And we basically put out a call to the various different Zcash communities online and asked, will you participate in our advisory panel, and you can vote on these different initiatives that we're considering. I wouldn't say it was an unequivocal success, because when you're getting people to vote on something, it's very important to word your question well so that the result is like unambiguous and actionable, and we didn't do the best job of that. In part because we let anyone submit ballots, so they could say, like, I want the Zcash Foundation to do XYZ thing, and we would put it on our like community advisory survey, and the voters could decide whether or not that's something that they thought the foundation should put energy into. And we're still kind of experimenting with how to make that kind of community feedback work well for the organization, like be in a form that the organization can respond to and be directed by. But I think more things like that, or at least in our future, and I hope in the futures of other cryptocurrency projects and other open source projects also, just like having responding to the needs of people as opposed to, so it's more of like a bottom-up kind of thing than a top-down imposition. Although, I don't know, I think there's a tough interplay between when you're doing anything that is near product design at all. There's an interplay between doing what people want and then making something that's actually good. And ideally, you want to make something that will be useful for people, that they will be happy to be able to use. But sometimes the path to doing that is not by following every suggestion that you get, right? So there has to be some kind of filtering between the just everything that people want you to do, especially since sometimes people have like contradictory desires. And I guess this circles back to governance, right? Like that governance is in large part deciding like which of these mutually exclusive things should we do. Have any of you participated in any kind of cryptocurrency governance, or like would you if the chance arose?
Yeah.
Governance, you mean?
No.
Yeah,
Is
like-
Zerocoin mined?
Yes,
Or-
yes, it's very similar
And do the
to.
miners get the votes or some way?
If they were miners, would be welcome to join the panel if they wanted. They do. I mean, they do have they choose what code to run, right? Like they choose what node implementations to use, and in a very like skin in the game, concrete way, that is their vote. They also, I mean, they sometimes participate in the community. I think the miners are a little quieter than other members or other sort of constituencies of the Zcash community, in part because most of them don't actually care that much about Zcash. They care about making money, which I don't fault them for. Like, they're useful. It's good that they are participating, and I'm glad to have them profiting off of securing the network and enabling Zcash to function. Yes, but I mean, the miners do have a lot of power.
So the question is, would you recommend that everybody would maintain some type of mining rig?
I think it's too difficult and annoying right now. I like the idea of having
What about
more.
expensive?
Yeah, also expensive. I like that idea. I'm not sure how practical it actually is. I don't know.
So what you were saying about the participating in the government, I don't know if that many people participated in the government of any cryptocurrencies, but we have benefited from the benevolence of the governance community. A lot of guys got Dash.
Oh yeah, are you
Right.
begging me for money again?
Well, all I'm saying is we've all been recipients of the welfare of the Dash government, and when's Zcash going to get their government together and give more welfare to the people? And by the people, I mean free money for us.
That actually is an interesting point, though. It's like Dash. I think Dash has been one of the more innovative projects in terms of how they run their community, how they did, which is funded by them getting this founders reward as for the first 4 years of mining. That's sorry, that explanation was probably convoluted. Did that make sense to everyone? I can go into more of the nuances.
Well, another thing about Dash, like, yes, the master nodes get the votes, but there's like 3,000 master nodes. So
Yeah, that's a lot of them.
So they're all voting on different things. And the other thing is that, yes, they do have more say over it, but it's like they're more invested in it. So they're going to give more of a crap.
Skin in the game.
Yeah, they're going to have more skin in the game as opposed to somebody like me that has a more diversified crypto portfolio. And I'm like, oh, I like these guys. Oh, they're okay. Da-da-da. But somebody's like, oh, I'm going all in on this. I feel like they care more and they'll be more invested. And then, like, the node people, they're like really opinionated. They're really invested in the community because they do have that power.
And you can make an argument that something like Bitcoin is also in many ways a plutocracy because it's so expensive to set up a mining operation, especially one with any scale that gives you significant decision-making power. Even though Bitcoin is set up so that any given mining group can't unilaterally make decisions unless they have more than 51% of the network. It's still, if you have like a substantial percentage, people will care about what you think, and will care about your desires for the direction of Bitcoin. And that's really, really expensive, like on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars, I think.
Well, and could you argue that couldn't you argue that any sort of monetary system is going to end up a plutocracy where some have more than others? Hell, as a matter of fact, like, as far as looks go, I'm clearly at the top.
Our handsome leader.
Yeah. As far as handsomeness goes, it's a plutocracy, and
That's why you're in charge, right?
Business as usual.
Every time you see these bad behaviors from what is considered the prevailing economy leaching into this emerging economy, it seems to me that's a sign that there's a robustness to it. If there are people who manipulate the cash stock market and it is continuing to renew itself, it's obvious that that's a model that works in breathing life into a new entity. Now, whether or not it's sustainable, whether or not without somebody with guns, a government to show up and show these people who are using their plutocratic rights to maybe unjustly influence the market, we don't know. This is all, we're watching the birth of something, and who knows whether or not it will eat itself or flourish without.
Or who gave birth to it to begin with.
Right.
We were talking about that earlier.
I mean, who's the mom and the dad? We don't know, but.
Well, so to that point, I think one of the aspects of the cryptocurrency world that's very different from normal fiat money is that there's so much competition. And as I was saying earlier, I think this is a great thing, but it also has sort of odd monetary implications. Like, Bitcoin has a limited monetary supply. It at least is eventually, is probably currently and eventually is like designed to be deflationary. But there are other cryptocurrency projects that are inflationary or have like weird mechanisms like Grin, which starts out inflationary and then is supposed to transition to being deflationary. So people can sort of opt into their preferred monetary policy. But then you also have things like there was the big split, which created Bitcoin Cash, and now Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash are both worth something. In a sense, is that inflation of Bitcoin, or is it a wholly new project that is gaining value? How to think about that kind of thing is still not totally clear to me. What do you want to say?
Recently I thought governance is easier to understand, at least in comparing protocols. So if you compare like Ethereum versus EOS and NEO, you can see like Ethereum has Ethereum Foundation and Consensus, and then NEO has like City of Zion, which no one knows who it is, but they're the ones who are developing like the NEO
Such an
protocol.
apocalyptic name.
I know. It doesn't bode well for them.
So I mean, we have like different ways of developing these protocols, but some are like way more centralized. Like you even have influencers like Vitalik that some people say has like all the power, although he says he's like losing power anyway. But I think if we just like, even if we just like Googled like these different protocols, like it's really easy to kind of see the differences in how the governance systems work. And it becomes, at least for me, it became clear on how those differences work.
Do you have a preference? So I know that's a personal question, so you can deflect it if you want to, but I'm curious, I'm actually really curious about sort of in this room, is there anyone who has like a strong preference for a particular type of governance? Like, do you like it more when there's one person who's like the end filter for all decisions? Or would it be better to have like a committee or something? What do you think?
I like anarchy.
You like anarchy?
How'd you pick my word, man? I was saying anarchy.
But even with anarchy, you need decision-making processes.
Yes, anarchic
So-
decision making.
Yeah. So what actual? So say someone wants to add a new feature to Bitcoin, and the developers are going to argue about it. What's your preference for how it's actually decided?
I don't have a preference. Let the people decide without any
All right,
government.
fair enough.
That's
What is
for
my
local
preference?
Systems. Like in local systems that works, but on a global scale, it's, at least to me, it makes a lot of sense if something like NEO starts out super centralized and then over time, as you have a dedicated group of people building it, it becomes more decentralized. So it can go from centralized to decentralized over time.
But that would mean,
Well,
that means that I apologize. And that means that everything needs to try and be global.
Well, I think
Well-
there's a lot of projects that have baked in from the very beginning in their, whatever their mission statement is, that they will let go at these points of build.
And they get progress.
And they
to
will
build.
let go, and if this happens, we still have yet to see it play out, but let's say it does, then we'll see them go from like, a 20% to a 10% to a 5%. If that happens, that's truly decentralized with still having some form of control in terms of, again, you have to have consensus to build something. You have to collaborate. Otherwise, everybody could just build one-man shows, and we'll have a lot of stuff that breaks.
Well, prior to Reconstruction, there was 8,000 currencies in America. Before, the monetary system got together and said, hey, we're going to have one American dollar. So the anarchy that persisted before that, it was fraught with what's called counterfeiting and things like that. But still, every idea starts off as a plutocracy. And then it becomes more decentralized as people feed into that system. And the best system that feeds the people, instead of I don't know whether it's the Jesuits or the Knights Templars, or both of them Catholics, right?
I believe it's the Illuminati, right?
Well, they're still, secret societies built into world societies that basically seek to control the behavior of the people through monetary policy. And so anarchy is the right word, but how do you keep the big players from coming in and planting someone who may look like a friend?
You can't stop them, man.
Or you voice an exit, like you were
Or
saying.
you
But,
pick up a
but
different
I wanted to
currency.
say something about your question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is all great ideas started with one person. Okay? Not a group, not a think tank, So there's the advantage to having a leader at the top who's leading the charge.